I was able to sort of have such a emotional connection with the vision that I really want for my life and for my work that like I wasn't as scared, right? I mean, we're all scared. And in fact, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, if I'm not scared by this thing that I'm doing, then
Yeah.
it's probably not true enough to myself.
Because that pain of regret, and I said the pain of loneliness, and just realizing I pushed everybody away to be a high achiever. And who was going to be there at my deathbed? Not any of my diplomas. None of them. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you're new here. I am honored on this special day. It is my birthday, and I couldn't spend it any other way than having the amazing Dr. Weili Gray with me today. Weili is a sleep medicine physician in rural Vermont. She is also the host of the Dare to Dream Physician Travel podcast, and she is on a mission to help physicians to live life to the fullest, especially through travel. So I'm looking forward to talking more about that with Weili today. And I'll say she had this life planning workshop that was extremely meaningful for me, and it's such a powerful tool. So I know this is going to be such a meaningful conversation. But before we dive in, Willie, thanks for being with me today.
First of all, happy birthday. I'm so
Thanks.
honored to learn that we are actually meeting for the first time one-on-one on your birthday. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And for the people who have not yet had the honor of meeting you, can you share us a little bit more about your story?
Sure. I'm not really sure where to start when people ask me that. It's sort of like a loaded question, but I would say that, for what we were talking about, since you were referring to life planning, now it's about, was when COVID started. So 3, 4 years ago, I lose track of time after
Yeah,
about,
I
about 3, 4 years
can't believe
ago.
it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, I was, I thought I was like living my dream life. I had, just finished I had, gone through medical school, internship, residency, fellowship, and my poor family at that time I was married and, had 3 young kids and my poor husband and kids have had to like follow me wherever I was going. And at that time I thought, right, like my life is settled now, I can just I have this great job and I enjoy what I do. And it's like, I'm just, I'm gonna like, what's the word? Coast along in life. I don't have
Yeah.
to, I don't have to, sort of like worry about survival every day anymore, like I did as an intern. Um, and then, like a lot of physicians, COVID came, and the things that we took for granted, or the things that we were like, yeah, we're just going to coast along, sort of got swept under our feet. And a lot of things that we assumed were true were not true. And for me, that included that, I was just going to coast along my career. Like I thought I did a really good job trying to find my dream position, but like all things in life, things change, and in medicine, things change really fast. Even in an era where a lot of other my physician colleagues in the country were, talking about being disrespected and just sort of not having autonomy and just feeling squeezed from all directions. I thought I had found a position that where that wasn't the case, and but yet things were starting to change at work, where it I started to feel some of that, a lot of that, and also it's like, you sit there and you're like, I've seen that movie before. Maybe it didn't happen in my life yet, but I've seen that movie, so you sort of know where things were going. And so at that point, now I kind of call it a midlife crisis. I think I just hit about 40 or around that time. And I was just like, I don't even know if I'll be a doctor anymore. Like, it's like that feeling of being stuck. Like, I thought I did everything I was supposed to, and here I am, and yet I feel stuck. Like, I don't, all the things that I had worked really hard for, was it worth it? Like, it's just a complete identity crisis where I remember sitting in a room with my husband and saying, and and at that time and still now, my husband is a computer engineer who decided to sort of be the stay-at-home dad, the homeschooling dad. And so I asked my husband, like, do you think I could just, quit my job and maybe I could just find something else, like just anything, maybe something that's not in medicine. Um, and fortunately, my husband was very supportive. He's like, yeah, money is what makes people happy. So, we'll figure it out. Like, do what you have to do.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, well, we met when I was in college. So, neither of us had any money or income. So
Oh,
it's nice to have, to have someone in my family who shares the same values.
yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of how it started. And at that point, I was like, oh well, if I'm gonna leave medicine and find something else where I don't feel, squeezed by insurance and squeezed by administration, well, what can I do? Like, I don't know how to do anything. I spent, the last 10 plus years of my life training in medicine and trying to, have kids and survive a marriage. Like, I don't really have any other expertise at this point. Um, and the one thing that I tried to teach myself, because I was so desperately mired in student loans and, sort of this alphabet soup of like, 401k, like all these things I just didn't understand. I did spend some time, I had a sabbatical sort of that I created for myself before I started as an attending, where I spent some time to learn, like, kind of get my finances together. And like with most things, when we sort of decide that, okay, this is really important to us, and even though it feels really impossible, but we invest the time and energy to sort of understand it, like I felt that it was very, that part of the time that I spent was very, really rewarding. So I'm like, well, that's the only other thing I know how to do is, I'm very financially literate and I know how to invest. So I'm like, well, maybe I'll just become a financial planner. I'll leave medicine to be a financial planner. And so the one thing that I was like, well, what would be the next step if I want to do that? Well, maybe I should attend a financial planning conference. I mean, so I could meet some other people and, decide if this is for me. So long story short, I attended a life planning conference, which is all of the people that were in attendance were financial planners, except for me. I was actually
Interesting.
really embarrassed to tell them that I was not a financial planner and that I was a doctor. Like, I was like, I hope they didn't hear that.
That is really interesting. And why were you, what makes it embarrassing?
I mean, up until then, I just never professionally never really hung out with anybody but doctors, or like students or doctors. Um, and then I think it's just the fear of the unknown. I'm like,
Yeah.
do I belong? Like, will these people accept me? Like, I'm not like them, I don't have the same background. And so, and then part of me is like, are they gonna laugh at me? Like, what? They're probably thinking like, what's a doctor doing here? So yeah, all of those things.
It seems, and that's fascinating to me because like, why are I mean, the life planning, like different perspectives, right? Life planning makes sense from a financial standpoint. Life planning makes sense from a physician standpoint, right? In terms of the actual mind, body, soul. And then, of course, the logistics of material goods that we have here. It's like, it would make sense to be. I'm curious, how did they receive that when you would cough, tell them that you were a physician?
Yeah. So when I had the courage to actually tell them and actually, like look at their reaction, because that's the other thing is like, oh my
Uh,
gosh, I don't even want to know. They were really welcoming. I mean, especially the trainers. They were like, yeah, it makes total sense that, even what you do as a physician, because the whole premise of, life planning, which was a field that was created by George Kinder, who was a financial planner, that he just wanted people to know what's really important to them in their life. Like, what's the thing that they're really living for? And then when you know that, then that helps you figure out your finances, right? Because what's the point of, saving up all this money for retirement, and, doing all the motions and doing kind of this automatic thing that, like, hey, everyone else is like, my neighbor is doing it or my colleague is doing it. And then in the end, that's really not where you want to lead your life. And so it made sense to kind of figure that out for financial planning. But like you said, it really made sense for everything. And so, yeah, they were actually really, really welcoming. And even till this day, I do use um, I use a lot of what I learn in, as a as a life planner with my patients when I kind of talk to them about, well, what's important to you? Like, do you want to go through this medical treatment? So yeah, I think it is, these principles apply to everybody.
I'm really surprised that not before you provided your workshop, I hadn't really heard of a life planner. And I am curious, like, what your perspective was on that. Like, I think, we learned so much about what's devoid in medicine is people have a hard time talking about anything that has to do with our mortality. And I think it does such a disservice for all of us who know, like, the only outcome we all know for sure is that we have an end date, at least within, whatever their belief, spirituality after that is, like, for this physical body that we have in this present moment. Like, from the best of what I can understand and perceive, is that, like, we all have an end to it. So we should, like, prepare for that. But we're so resistant.
It's so true. I think as a culture, Americans are very scared of death. It's not, I mean, having grown up in Chinese culture, just even the way we think about aging in Chinese culture is so different from American culture, because it's almost like there's this natural cycle of life, right? Like we're young, and then we're like babies, and then we're the youth, and then we're young adults, and then we're middle age, and then we're older adults. And so I think in many more traditional cultures, there's sort of this like acceptance of the cycle of life. And there's also practices that we do, even the way we take care of elderly people in Chinese culture. But whereas in American culture, it's kind of like, we're new, like we're a newer culture, and we just kind of kind of create things as we go along. And I feel like, our mortality is kind of not something that has been comfortable for our culture, and it sort of spills over in medicine. I definitely, see doctors not being comfortable thinking about mortality, thinking about their own mortality, and then as a result, having that reflect on, interactions that we have with our patients. But so, you mentioned how life planning was really powerful. So the reason why I'm even talking about life planning was because that was what changed my life at that point, with this my midlife crisis, and where I'm like, I'm just gonna drop out and leave medicine, because through that process, I attended this conference, and it was basically like an intro to life planning. And so they did life planning on me. And oh, and by the way, because I didn't have any CME money to pay for this, I'm like, I'm going to volunteer and get everything I can out of this.
Yeah.
And whereas usually I'm this really quiet introvert who doesn't really say anything and is
Mhm.
afraid to, like, get palpitations even trying to talk to a room full of people. I like volunteered to
Wow.
have them do life planning demonstrations, and they told me, they're like, well, you can volunteer to be part of the demonstration, but what everything you say has to be 100% true, right? Because that's how life planning works. Like, yeah, everything has to be true. Like, you can't role play. It's not role playing, it's real life. So yeah, that's where I was introduced to the three questions, which I love to share
Yeah.
with you and then your audience. And it's really when I had like all these aha moments that really, started changing my life.
Well, that's amazing. I'm ready. I'm ready. And I love to hear more
Okay.
questions and kind of how, like, what went through your mind and how it impacted you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, so these three questions in life planning are, you might have heard, kind of maybe different versions of these questions, but I really like the way that it's presented, because it kind of moves us along in this process. And so, question number one, I really like, it's a fun question. Question number one goes, I want you to imagine that you are financially secure. So you have enough money to take care of your needs, and we can add, if you feel like you're responsible for, like, kids, or, whatever rest of your family, you can add that too, like take care of your needs and your loved ones' needs now and in the future. The question is, how would you live your life? So if you are financially secure, how would you live your life? Would you change anything? Let yourself go. Don't hold back on your dreams. Describe a life that is complete, that is richly yours.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I have chills from this question. So, for anyone tuning in, if you are in a place where you can pause this, I'd recommend you pause it and you really think about the answer and take time to write it down.
Yeah. And this question is meant to be fun, because so many of us, so many of sort of, middle class Americans, even, even these, like, we're, the audience of this show, high achieving professionals, so many of us are like running the rat race because there's this, it's really hard to feel financially secure in
Yeah.
America, right? Unless you're, have this like huge trust fund, or, you had all this inheritance. Most Americans just feel like, okay, I just like it, I have to survive, I have to do the thing. And you feel like you don't really have choices because like you just have to make money. You have to, you have to um, show up at whatever job is expected of you, and, have that financial security, which in our day and age, it doesn't feel secure anymore. Any, like, even in our jobs, we don't feel secure. So question number one is helping us imagine, what if you take that fear away, right? What if you're just imagining, what if you're free from that financial insecurity that so many of us live with, and just imagine, what would your life be like if this, you didn't have to worry about that. And yeah, so it's fun, right? Like this is a
Yeah.
fun
I'm
question, and I
thinking they
hope.
could even draw it, right? Like maybe not even have to write it down, but whatever helps them to process and to visualize whatever works for their learning style to really embody that and then to capture when the fear will probably arise as we're exploring and dreaming and then like okay, where is that fear? Let it go. I'm curious if you would you like to go over the three questions and then tell me what kind of your experience was or what's the best way to maybe.
Yeah, let's go over all three
Yeah.
questions, and then we can reflect on them,
Okay.
each, if we each have any reactions to it. So question number two, this one starts to get serious. So this time you visit your doctor, who tells you that you only have 5 to 10 years left to live. The good part is that you won't ever feel sick. The bad news is that you will have no notice of the moment of your death. What will you do in the time you have remaining to live? Will you change your life? And how will you do it? So question number two, just for clarification, because a lot of people ask this, we don't assume that question number one is true. So question number two is just whatever your financial situation is like right now. So it's not like you have unlimited financial resources. Now it's that, we're faced with, we have limited time, but it's not that limited, right? 5 to 10 years. I mean, really, that's the way that question is framed. It sort of forces us to consider it, but it's not really that far-fetched, right? For any of us. I mean, nobody, no matter how old we are right now, nobody's really guaranteed to have more than 5 to 10 years left to live,
Yeah.
right? So it's a very humbling question, but also a very important question for all of us to just answer. And I would say that, as you're answering this, to really feel it, right? Like these questions are not meant to just be like intellectual thought experiments. They are completely meant to be visceral. We are, getting connected with our mortality, and, the reality that each of us may only have 5 to 10 years left to live. And we don't know the day that we would die. None of us know. And so, yeah, that's question number two.
Yep. That one hits deep. Mm-hmm.
So question number three, this time your doctor shocks you with the news that you only have 1 day left to live. Notice what feelings arise as you confront your very real mortality. Ask yourself, what did I miss? Who did I not get to be? What did I not get to do?
Mm.
So, question number 3 is even more serious. And I would encourage you again, it even says it in the prompt, notice what feelings arise as you confront your very real mortality. And so I would encourage whoever, is trying to answer this to really dig deep. And if you were like me when I first sort of noticed this question, I was like my mind was in such a place. I'm like, well, I just have all these checklists in my mind, I'm just
Yeah.
stressed out all the time. And oh yeah, like I didn't finish my will, or like I didn't have the right estate documents. I didn't, I should have done this and this. So that's not what really this question is about. It's going deeper. It's saying, okay, really at that point it's too late. Don't even worry about the estate plan. It's about what, your life, and reflecting on your life. What did you miss in your life, that the life that you have lived so far? Who did you not get to be? Who did you want to be, but you didn't get to do it? And what did you not get to do? So it's really just being honest and taking an inventory of those, of the regrets that we have, um, when our time is up. And I think the hard thing about that question is, that nobody feels like they'll get to that day. And of course, we don't really know, when we get to the last day of our life. But to be able to kind of travel forward in time and to do a really true reflection, takes a lot of courage, and it can actually be also draining. So I definitely had people say, oh my gosh, this is like too much. Like I don't want to think about it. I'm not ready. And that's
Yeah.
okay. If you're not ready, don't freeze yourself. But if you kind of, if anything that comes up, it might be good to write it down. Because
Mhm.
the idea of life planning is to not make us feel guilty or have regrets or, any of those things. It's to just help us see the truth that's in life, um, and then start planning, right? Like what do we, because I mean, most of us, it's today is not our last day. So what do we do now that we know the truth of how we really feel?
Wow. It's on my channel introduction, at least for now. Oh, who knows if when they're watching this, it will still be my introduction. But it talk about Bronnie Ware's 5 regrets of dying. The first one, like I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life that others expected of me. That definitely hits with your third question there.
So powerful, right? That what people say at the end of their life, is so telling. And yeah, I love that sort of, series of, that's a book, right? I think,
Yeah, the
um,
five
I,
regrets of dying or something like that.
yeah, I read the article. I haven't read the book, but I've read the article about it. But it's so powerful, and that's exactly it. In America, we have such a fear of
Hmm.
of sort of like not being well and not having health and dying, that, um we don't, really want to think about it. But it we're missing out, when we are not facing this truth about life. And that's exactly it, right? So if people, the most common thing that comes up is, I wish I could be more true to myself. I wish I had the courage to live a life that was true to myself and not what other people expected of me. Why not come to terms with that now, right? Why
Yeah.
not come to terms with that when you're 20, when you're 30, when you're 40, when you're 50, 60? It doesn't even matter, right? Because, we have, most of us who are listening, we have time. We just don't know how much time, but we know we have finite time. And, the changes that we can make, we can start making tomorrow. And that's, or today. I mean, because
Yeah. Right
today is
now.
so young.
Yeah. It's interesting too because so I in 2016 I was dealing really critically, physically with my eating disorder. And I flew myself from North Carolina to Utah for residential treatment that couldn't keep me because my heart rate was, for people who don't love to hear numbers, they might want to just consider this as a heart rate as a fact, and that if your heart rate is different, doesn't mean you're less sick. I'll just say that for anyone with eating disorder, but my heart rate is in the 20s.
Oh,
And
wow.
I felt fine. I was so detached from my body. I was like, I wasn't really in tune with any physical symptoms of that. But because it was in that area, the residential treatment center couldn't keep me, and they put me in a medical hospital. And the medical hospital was like, "Well, you just need eating disorder treatment." So I was stuck between two different places that didn't want to keep me. And because I wasn't ready to face that, I was, in denial. I was dissociated, whatever was going on. But I did sit there and I reflected. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, all the things that I've been focusing on, they don't matter. All of the honors, all of the certifications, if I owned a house and stuff at that point, then that was going to be a burden for my family to have to sort through." And it was so clear to me, but I wasn't at that age and stage of my life that I could deal with it. So I went straight back. I was an oral surgery resident at the time. I went straight back to residency and I said, "Okay, I'm going to, rescind my FMLA. They couldn't keep me and I'm just going to go back." And then a
Oh,
year later, I was back in the hospital. And then in 2021, the stress of COVID, that's almost killed me. And I was like accepting of it. And I just took a chance that I could get through it one more time. And I'm only now, in like, in the past 2 months, maybe, like, this conversation is such a good timing because I'm like, in the past 2 months, I've been allowing myself to be like, that was my life. Like, that is my life. And still have the same body. So, like, my body remembers it. I still have the
yeah.
same mind. My mind remembers it. And how can so that it prompted death anxiety, which we talked about before people had the opportunity they weren't here for it. So I'll share with them a little bit of what it brought up. As I was feeling so much death anxiety, and in order to not die, my world got real small. I'm like, this is the opposite reaction. And so your life planning is so helpful. It's like, okay, if we're afraid to die, and I think about the anecdote to not succumbing to the anxiety, it's like, how can I live better? Right? If we accept we're going to die, how can I live better? And that's everything that you're saying. And I share my story just, it's for my own processing, right? And also for people that we can do this exercise, and it's like, well, everyone else is going to die, but not me, right? Or like everyone else, but not my family member. And I like, but if we give ourselves the opportunity to say, like, gosh, our life is so limited. What things would we stop worrying about? What drama would we let go? What relationships will we work to repair real quickly? And that's kind of the takeaways I had. I'm really curious to hear more about your takeaways.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for being so open about that journey that you've had. You've made references to it, and I think, as you're processing, as you're healing, you're making, you're sharing more and more of that really
Yeah.
vulnerable journey that you've had, and I so appreciate it. It I know it's helping others, as you're sharing what you're comfortable with sharing, and I can't even imagine. You're sort of sharing some of these details, and I'm picturing it, and I'm just like, wow, having such a visceral reaction to it. Um, but you're right in that I I I was sharing that, growing up, I also had a lot of death anxiety, because I had, when I was a baby, I had this tumor, and then it was, my understanding was a benign tumor, but I had an operation, and so I have this big scar on my body, and so like growing up, I was just, as like a little girl, I didn't really know that much medicine. I just know that, okay, there's this scar that kind of hurts, and what does this mean? And does this mean I'm going to die sooner than other people? So there are all these things that sort of kids don't, as a kid, I didn't even know how to verbalize, but it's just kind of like in my thoughts all the time. And I think that is, part of the transformation that um, occurs through life planning is, whether you think about death or not, or whether you never think about death or you think about death a lot because of, previous experiences you've had in your life. But by sort of facing our mortality, we can, I mean, in some ways, it's almost like you'd never think about death and now you do. You're having more death anxiety, like you're
Yeah.
coming to grips with death anxiety. and to use that to transform that anxiety into energy for your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And I think that's the switch. So I share these questions, and I answer these questions when I did my first round at life planning. And then the other part of life planning is we sort of look at these answers, and then we create, and the life planner, we can do it ourselves, but oftentimes there's like internal oppression where we almost can't do it. But a life planner or somebody can reflect this back at you, at the things, the elements that are so important to you. And so at that time, when I was having this midlife crisis and wanting to leave medicine, I kind of wrote some of these things down. Legacy was important to me, making a difference was important to me, being a doctor was actually really important to me. And that was a big aha. Like I wrote down, I'm like, I love being a doctor. I love healing people. I love having people share their vulnerable parts of their health. And, that went back to when I was a kid, and I had all these health anxieties. And, like I sort of have that firsthand understanding of how patients feel. And I always felt privileged to be their doctor. So, as they're sharing it, I can be there and sort of sit with them and create a space to heal with them. And so all of these things that were important to me. And then the other thing, of course, was I was always so stressed out in my head, and I couldn't really enjoy any time with my family, which is probably a very common thing. But to me, it felt like impossible for me to get these things out of my head so I can enjoy a moment with my kids and my husband, because otherwise I just like always had these like constant checklists, like, oh, we have to do this, like the laundry wasn't done,
Mm.
the we have to, the everyone's hungry, like we have to cook and we have to wash the dishes. And so um, I just wanted a moment of peace where I could enjoy these things, and where I could have work that was meaningful, where I felt like I was making impact. So it was like in some ways really simple. And actually, as I'm kind of reflecting to the life planner, he's like, oh yeah, I think you can do this. And I'm like, well, I don't know. And so he painted this scene 6 months from when we were talking. He sort of imagined this scene for me and painted it like a movie. Here you are, you're sitting at home by your garden, and it's sunny, and your kids are laughing, and you're seeing your kids laugh, and your husband turns to you and says, I noticed that you're just really happy in the last 6 months. Like you've really been able to do the work that's important to you, and I just notice how relaxed you are when you're at home. Just he kind of created this scene from a movie, from the life that I really want, and reflected it back to me. And it's like so simple, but I just started crying, and which I've never done before because I don't usually cry in front of people. And
Interesting.
so to cry in front of like 24 strangers on Zoom was
Mm.
and so it just gave me that energy, right? So as I'm reflecting on, gosh, what would I miss out on if I only have 5 to 10 years left to live? What do I really want if I didn't feel like I had to do things just for money? What do I regret if I were to die today? And in synthesizing the answers I had to that, and creating the life that it's where I what that reflects what I really really desired, it just gave me that energy actually to go forward in my life and make a difference.
Wow. It's so powerful. I'm really impressed. And then how did you get back to the medicine part? You said that you valued medicine. How did you make that work for you?
Yeah, so that was like one big aha after the life planning. I mean, literally, it was like, it happened. This conference was like a Zoom, and it happened over a couple of days on Zoom. And then at the end of this couple of days, I'm like, I love being a doctor. Like, why would I want to leave medicine? And it, then I thought about it. I'm like, oh, I wanted to leave because of pain, because I felt like, the way that I want to practice medicine was being challenged by, whatever powers were there at the time at my workplace. And it was almost like too painful to think that, okay, this person could take it away from me, could take it away from patients too. Like,
Mm.
part of me feels like there's sort of like the right way to practice medicine, and there's like the unethical way to practice medicine. And
Yeah.
So I just a lot of it was like running away from pain, like the fear of just really it's like having almost like having a vision of what you think is so important, but then like, oh, maybe someone's going to take it away in a flash, right? That's sort of like the fear that I was holding in, and the pain that I was wanting to avoid for myself. Like if I just, escape medicine, I don't have to see that ever happen, and then I
Mm,
can avoid that pain.
wow. Wow. Isn't that so important? I would really ask people, I do a lot of coaching for people who are considering getting out of medicine. And I often, we really pause to say, well, what is it? Like, what's at the core there? And you just highlighted the importance because people want to get away from the pain of the system, the burden, the oppression. And if you can bring in the autonomy, the agency, and where their values are in alignment and where they can create a position, like if you want to stay and be a doctor, how can you be a doctor that aligns with your values and mitigate, though it's challenging to completely absolve all of the moral injury and the burnout risks and the systemic pressures and oppression that there exists. Like, how can you create your position that aligns with your values and your vision while we do challenge the status quo, we do challenge the way that it's operating as a whole?
Absolutely. And I think that shift, and my story, my examples are just an example, but that shift of I'm not going to live a life based on fear, based on, wanting to escape pain, based on wanting to escape rejection, pain, whatever it is that we're sort of unconsciously escaping. And I'm going to live a life based on what I really want, based on desire, based on um, conviction,
I
based
love
on
this.
my values, my
Mm-hmm.
principles, the legacy that I want to have. And
Mm-hmm.
so that where, of course it's scary to want to do that, because when you kind of put those things out there, the things that are like the closest to your heart, that are most important to you, it hurts more, right? If someone laughs at it or rejects it,
Mm,
or like, you feel like they're blocking the way. Um, but through life I was able to sort of have such a emotional connection with the vision that I really want for my life and for my work, that like I wasn't as scared, right? I mean, we're all scared. And in fact, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, if I'm not scared by this thing that I'm doing, then
yeah.
it's probably not true enough to myself. Right. So
Mm,
it's
yeah.
not, it's like a little bit too cookie cutter. Like I'm following whatever society's expectations are, maybe a little bit too much, right? Like I would have to reflect on, is this even true to myself if I'm not that scared of asking the question, or, doing this thing?
And you painted two pictures. You can run away scared or you can run towards scared. Both are scared. One's running away from the fear, one's running towards what you desire. And it just it made such and this is again going back when people when I talk about permission to pivot, the first question I'm saying here is, are we pivoting and running away from something or are we pivoting and running towards something? It's really important for me to support people to run towards something because we're always going to be running away, and I feel like that's a recipe for regret.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the, not living true to ourselves, when we're reflecting on our deathbeds, right? Because when you're just running away from something, you're almost just being bullied, right? You're unconsciously reacting to, whatever forces you are fearing. And I mean, and in some ways, like, yes, there may be external oppression, like there may be true, actual
Mhm.
systemic oppression,
Yeah.
but it's also an internal oppression that we're doing to ourselves, right? By accepting it. So yeah, I think that's so good that you do that with your clients too, because it's such an important distinction. And in fact, I hear, sort of just hearing colleagues kind of talk about their problems, and just kind of just hearing people talk about their experience of being a doctor. I think it's so common that doctors are at the point where they just feel like they have to run away from something.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the transformation that I hope to inspire all doctors to do, is to really figure out, because there was so much passion, so much strength, so much conviction that drove us to apply, to go to medical school, to do residency, and 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 having, such a difficult journey through residency and training and being an attending, it sort of like makes us forget who we really were. And I think that's the work that we all have to do. The more we feel like pain by the system, the more we have to do that work of getting to know ourselves again, and being connected to, what our dreams really are.
Yeah. And for dreams, for some people, the dreams will look like staying in medicine. For some, the dreams will look like, no, I actually am going to pivot, but that's with intention, right? And clarity.
Yeah. Yeah. So the sequel to my story is I'm actually still at the same exact job 3, 4 years later, and I'm really, really happy. And I have definitely made, I basically what the way what I took away from that life planning session and my aha moment was, well, I was going to quit anyway. I mean, I was thinking of escaping, right? I was going to quit, like, and drop everything that I had worked so hard for, that I actually love doing, and I was going to go, to do something else. Why don't I just stay where I am and advocate, just start asking for things, start, speaking up, if I
Yeah.
was seeing something that I didn't agree with. And why don't I just do that? Because what's the worst thing that's going to happen, right? Like, okay, they fire me. Well, I was going to quit anyway. So how is
Yeah.
this really all that different? So it's almost like when you figure out, what do you have to lose and what do
Mhm.
you have to gain?
Yeah.
Then it's like a no-brainer. And even as uncomfortable as it is to, do some things that you're scared of, it still becomes a no-brainer, because the pain of actually not living your dreams and not at least trying for your dreams is actually more like when we really kind of when the moment of truth on our deathbeds, the people are telling us that the pain of going after what you really want is so much more painful than that, temporary pain of, fear and rejection, and all of those things that we're unconsciously avoiding in the moment.
Yeah. The pain of regret and the pain of loneliness for me when I was most ill was the pain of loneliness and everything I gave up in order to chase dreams that weren't ultimately in alignment with what I saw myself. I wanted to be a psychologist when I was in college. And I chased surgery for the ego, and like I thought I had to work as hard as possible and sacrifice as much as possible to earn my worth. And I did love surgery, just not enough to compromise the other aspects of my values, like spending time with people and sleeping, for example. Um, but just thinking about the deathbed regrets and just reiterating to the people, and what you said is, they've put themselves through this training for so long that if people are pausing to ask themselves right now, like, I don't even know how to answer those questions, like, that's completely fair. And for them to just say, I anticipate, we've spent a long time abandoning ourselves, and it actually can be quite painful to accept and realize that we've been living out of alignment. And that's where it's like important to process and to partner and to have groups and to have, people that are on a similar journey who know, like, gosh, even though you're now realizing you're going to live in alignment with our core values, like the grief of realizing where you haven't been in alignment. But like you said, it's worth it. It's worth it to face it. It's worth it to go after it, because that pain of regret, and I said the pain of loneliness and just realizing I pushed everybody away to be a high achiever, and who was going to be there at my deathbed? Not any of my diplomas. None of them. So thank you for sharing that. And with all of these questions, you've given them so much to take away, but are there any other takeaways you want to share with the audience?
As I shared before, my husband's actually really supportive in general. But when I first did this life planning, I'm like, oh, like it was so meaningful for me. Will you do it? And oh, will you like hear about, what I learned? And he really wasn't that interested. And like at first I was really hurt, because I'm like, oh, this is like my spouse, and they don't want to do life planning, they don't want to do this. And what I learned is, everybody kind of does it at their own pace and does it in their own way.
Yeah.
And so, as you're listening to this and you're like, wow, this is like so transformative. Like I know, I want to I want to make changes in my life. I want to start living a life of no regrets. Um, I would say find community. It doesn't have to be a spouse, right? Like I'm still happily married, and our marriage has grown in many ways. But he at first was, and still really is not all that interested in life planning because he does things his own way. He grows in his own ways. But I would say, find a community of people who are interested in growing in this way, and then don't look around for permission from other people, right? So like as I made this transformation and I go back to work and I'm like, this is what's really important to me. I want to be a doctor. I want to practice medicine in the way that I want to practice medicine and make an impact on patient the way I want to make an impact. I do not expect my other physician colleagues to necessarily have that same light bulb, right? So I am not looking for examples elsewhere. In some ways, in order to really live in alignment with who you are, you have to accept people looking at you like you're crazy at first.
Yeah.
And you have to accept kind of, saying things where people were like, what? I mean, that's kind of almost like a prerequisite,
Yeah.
because if unless you're just perfectly happy with the status quo,
Yeah.
if you're what you really truly desire and what you truly visualize for you and maybe the impact you want to make in the world not what is happening right now, then when you start making an impact in your life and in others' lives, um, everything you say is going to be completely foreign and countercultural and shocking. And so that's okay. Like you don't necessarily do not look for permission around you.
Mm.
Just sort of this is one of the reasons I love the work that you're doing, Dr. Jillian, is kind of understanding, kind of being in touch with, well, what really it is that's important and what's like your internal compass. So you have to sort of like get that energy from within, and let that like fire spread. And I have found through my work, some of the things that were like non-existing in my work. One of the things is I love patients. I hated documenting. I hated
Mm-hmm.
charting, and I felt it was really like at the end of the day, I'm like, wow, I had these amazing interactions with patients, but oh, I have to finish these notes. And so one of the things that I advocated for was getting a scribe, which was not something that anybody at my institution ever had. Some institutions may have, already accepted it. At the time, this was like never heard of. I mean, I guess maybe they knew the concept, but nobody had one. Um, and yet, after a lot of like, what are you talking about? No, like, don't even think about it. I did end up getting a scribe. But not only did I get one, within a year or two, this was actually a benefit that was offered to the physicians and the associate clinicians at my institution. So it's sort of now it's more normal. So the next person who's like, oh, I'm really burnt out by charting and this is really weighing me down at my institution, it's kind of a no-brainer. They're like, oh, well, yeah, like there's this thing called scribes.
Yeah.
But at the time it was like a lot of people would poo-poo the idea. A lot of other physicians would poo-poo the idea because they're like, well, I don't have any problems with charting, so why would you?
Mm.
And so it's just kind of having that, you have to find that conviction and the confidence within. And you may have naysayers, you may have people who support you. In fact, if you kind of talk loudly enough for long enough, you'll the people who are naysayers and end up supporting you too. But like none of that really matters, because what
Yeah.
really matters is you're doing the things that you care about, that you feel are the changes that you want to make in your sphere of influence.
I love it. I do offer a workshop on overcoming the fear of other people's opinions. So people can be on the lookout for when those are offered. I think it's huge because I offered it because, like what you're saying, is people were being mentally trapped in positions or in these perceptions of who they needed to be and what they needed to do because they were afraid of not actually what the other opinions were, but what they thought the other opinions were going to be. Like even just thinking what the financial planners were going to think of you for being at this life planning event, right? It may not even be grounded. It may be grounded in reality. It may not be. But we get paralyzed in this non-decision or indecision or high anxiety state because we are anticipating or mind reading what we think these people are thinking about us. And like, mostly people are thinking about themselves, right? There's like this whole spotlight phenomenon. Like most people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are. The people who love you, I don't want to say it in a way that I talk a lot about helping people to know they matter because, like, if you're in the state like I don't matter, I don't want them to hear like you don't matter. People don't think about you a lot. You matter, and external people that are not really in your life don't think about you that much. So it's to take away this pressure of having to please everybody, to know you matter, and especially to the people that are close to you, that love you, and that hopefully that support you, and may have some resistance. My family made fun of me for wanting to be a life coach. I signed up secretly, and now they endorse it. And going back to something you said, I think is really important to highlight. And whether it's true or not for people that get financially stuck, right? Like you had the capacity to speak up because, like, screw it, I was going to leave anyway. So like get, physicians that are up leveling their lives and they're spending so much money, like your freedom could be, I'm so financially secure right now. I have a plan that I can speak up when my position's not working out for me. I can transition if my position's not working for me. Like having the financial security and having a plan can help protect you from that feeling of being trapped. And like my capacity to pivot was because I thought I was going to be stay in residency or take my own life. And like, okay, and I hit a rock bottom with an illness. We don't want people to hit these rock bottoms. We want them to be, okay, well, go through the exercise, not like really be in the deathbed. Go through the exercise that Whaley shared. Like, please don't wait until you're on your deathbed. And I have to repeat that to myself too, right? Like the reason why I'm confronting that, oh, well, that was actually my life is
Mm.
because I'm part of this society too who doesn't want to talk about it. And when I talk about it with my family like that, I don't want to talk about it. I'm like, okay, I actually just had this conversation in Delia's palliative care group. I said, I went to a therapist to talk about my death anxiety, and immediately the topic was shifted. And I'm like, was it me or was it him uncomfortable? Who was uncomfortable? Because I went twice in a row, same topic. And then I brought it up in that palliative care and they were receptive. Let's talk about it. I'm like, in order to have these conversations with patients, with family members, we need to have their conversations with ourselves. And you just showcased it so well.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. But like you're saying, it's a it's sort of like a societal cultural problem. I mean, even I was saying, in Chinese culture, we talk about death, or I think we're more accepting of death. But even when my dad, had stage 4 cancer and was getting really sick, it
Yeah.
was a very difficult topic. And in fact, he didn't really want to talk about it. So I, just did my best to honor his wishes. It was very difficult. So yeah, I think this though is, shifting that is okay, we are going to die, but what is it that you want to live for? What and like you said, gosh, we don't want to get to the point where like my life or my job and now it's so clear what I have to do. But to sort of do those heart exercises where you're like, I am alive. What is it that I want to do? And so make those decisions based on the things that you want to live for.
This is such an incredible discussion. I would love to hear people's thoughts, their reflections, their comments, their appreciation for Willie. Oh my gosh, I have so much appreciation for you. So if people do want to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I would love to hear from anyone who's, interested in life planning. The other big thing that I love to talk about is travel, because that's one of my life plans is to travel with my family, see the world, experience different cultures, and sort of be have my life be transformed by those experiences. So I have a podcast, Dare to Dream Physician Travel Podcast. And I am on LinkedIn at Weili Gray, MD, and Instagram, Dream Physician on Instagram. So I love to connect with anyone, and I just want to say thank you, Dr. Jillian, for having this space for what you do, for being vulnerable and sharing your story, and then dedicating your work now to helping others after sort of having that pain yourself, and then helping others work through their pain and maybe avoiding pain in this way. This is what you do. I mean, I'm so like we're so aligned in the things that we talk about.
Mm, I
It's just
know.
sort of like I know you're like, oh, life planning sounds so cool. And whenever
Yeah.
I hear about, the work that you do, I'm like, yeah, this is exactly it. This is like right on, right on target with what everybody really, needs to think about for their life.
Well, thank you, Dr. Whaley. That means the world to me. Because I get, sometimes we get caught up in the like, does whatever I say matter? Because people don't, like you said, people don't want to hear it sometimes. So I get unfollowed. Like when I start talking about death and planning and stuff, I'm like, I noticed some unfollowers, and that's fine, actually. It's like I barely ever, want to focus on the numbers, but I just, maybe it's my own, like, perception. Like I know I'm going to get a lot of unfollowers, but the people who stay are the people who are going to benefit. So even if we're reaching a small, intimate crowd who wants to dive deep, we're here for you. Well, thank you for being here, Dr. Whaley. And thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you to the audience. And until next time, appreciate you being here.